All right, now this is from the latest from the top court on the Maharashtra legal showdown. Now, the Supreme Court has asked Maharashtra Deputy Speaker and Legislative Office to file an affidavit on whether the notice of motion for removing Speaker was received and why it was rejected. Also, file a comprehensive affidavit. The court has said notice to Deputy Speaker, the Secretary, State Legislative Assembly, State of Maharashtra, Ajay Chaudhary, Sena Legislature Party Head. Now, the SG has accepted notice for the Union of India. Counter affidavit to be filed in 5 days and rejoinders be filed from 3 days thereafter. Meenakshi joins us on the broadcast. For more on this, Meenakshi, take us through all the latest developments that we're seeing on this case.
Well, the Supreme Court is keeping the matter pending with itself. That's the big news. The court has given a next date of hearing, which is the 11th of July, when the matter has been posted for a next date of hearing. And like you rightly mentioned, the court has issued notices on the pleas of the rebel Shiv Sena MLAs challenging the disqualification proceedings initiated against them. And not just that, the Supreme Court, like you rightly mentioned, has asked the Maharashtra Deputy Speaker and the Legislative Office to file an affidavit on whether the notice of motion for removal of Speaker was received and why it was rejected. So that response also has been sought by the Supreme Court. A comprehensive affidavit has been sought by the top court. Now, the issue at stake here is quite multifarious. But the primary issue here has been what has been put out by the counsels on both sides. Advocate Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul, representing the case of the rebel MLAs, saying that the Deputy Speaker and his role itself is under the scanner, and therefore he is not the authority to adjudicate on the disqualification pleas now of these MLAs. And then he went on to allege as to how purportedly a lot of undue haste has been shown by him to seek responses of these MLAs in a very limited period of time, instead of giving them a mandatory period of 7 days to file their responses, to which we heard before the Honorable Supreme Court, Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi say as to how these are all discretionary powers which the Speaker is entitled to as per the constitutional provisions, and the Supreme Court really cannot be dealing or getting involved in the proceedings of the House. So the question of how much time should be given to anybody to file a response, those questions, according to Abhishek Manu Singhvi for Uddhav Thackeray, falls within the purview of the discretionary powers of the Speaker. They fall within the ambit of the proceedings of the House, and no court can interfere in how a Speaker chooses to exercise his discretionary powers, which he draws from constitutional provisions. So, a logjam of sorts again playing out here in the Supreme Court. We have seen several other assembly imbroglios as well in the past, from Karnataka assembly imbroglio to other assembly imbroglios play out in the Supreme Court. And the famous 2016 ruling of Nabam Rebia has been relied upon extensively by counsels like Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul to emphasize as to how, if the Deputy Speaker or the Speaker themselves are under the scanner, then they cannot be the authority to adjudicate on the disqualification pleas of the rebel faction. Here, Neeraj Kishan Kaul also highlighting that this Aghadi government has lost its trust now, and therefore the Speaker is hesitant to undergo a fresh trust vote mandate. So these were some of the twists and turns of the case, but the big news is that the Supreme Court is choosing to keep this matter pending before itself. It has not concluded the matter. It will adjudicate further on the finer points. The Supreme Court is keeping the matter pending with itself and has sought extensive responses of all parties involved, and in the meantime it has posted the matter for a next date of hearing on the 11th of July.
All right, Meenakshi, having said that the court is, has chosen to keep the matter pending, how do we see the fact that the deadline for replying to the disqualification notice that very shortly, in fact at 5:30, the deadline ends? So how do we put that? Please put that in perspective. What happens to that next?
Well, yes, you see, that's an interesting question. And now, because the Supreme Court is keeping the matter pending with itself, and now that even the role of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker is under the scanner and the radar of the Supreme Court. It would have been a different matter altogether if the Supreme Court had sent back these MLAs to either the High Court or back to the Speaker's office. The Supreme Court has not done that. So, given the fact that the matter is pending before the Supreme Court, the faction MLAs will always have the recourse now to give as a logical reasoning, saying that their petition is pending in the Supreme Court. Until the Supreme Court decides their petition one way or the other, the Speaker really cannot force them to make a reply by 5 p.m. today. So if they say that today, that will be a viable response, because like we just underlined, the matter is pending in the Supreme Court very much. The Supreme Court has given a next date of hearing, and in this backdrop, given the fact that several layered aspects are under consideration of the Supreme Court for a judicial evaluation, these rebel faction MLAs very well have a defense on their hands, which is a legally viable ground to say that they cannot respond by 5 p.m. as was mandated earlier by the Speaker's deadline, given the fact that the larger question of the Speaker's powers, including their discretionary powers of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, and the fate of the MLAs themselves, is now under the Supreme Court's consideration.
Right. And Meenakshi, also, if you could take us through the fact that Eknath Shinde moved an additional plea, saying that the family members of the rebel MLAs are feeling threatened and that they should be provided security. Did the court happen to mention anything about that?
Well, not directly really, but yes, that has surfaced in the proceedings today when it was before the Honorable Supreme Court that senior advocate like Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul went ahead and said as to how the atmosphere and the overall climate is inconducive for the rebel MLAs to be seeking any form of justice in Maharashtra. And of course, that was an indirect reference to all the comments that we've been seeing coming out from Maharashtra pertaining to this conflict or the logjam that is continuing. We have seen comments by Sanjay Raut, and that was a clear, reference to that comment that was today highlighted by Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul before the Supreme Court, where he went ahead and said as to how the atmosphere has become completely inconducive for these MLAs to be seeking any form of a legal recourse or justice in the state of Maharashtra, in particular in Bombay. He went ahead and said that one reason why these MLAs have knocked directly on the doors of the Supreme Court and not on the High Court, which was a question that the Supreme Court posed to Neeraj Kishan Kaul, that why are you leapfrogging directly to the Supreme Court, bypassing the High Court's jurisdiction? To that, the counsel said that the reason is that a minority of the legislative party subverting the state machinery, attacking our houses, saying that our dead bodies will be returned. An atmosphere is not conducive for us to exercise our rights in Bombay. So this was the valid ground which was cited or urged upon before the Supreme Court by Mr. Neeraj Kishan Kaul. He is a senior advocate representing the case of the MLAs before the Apex Court. And it was a clear reference to the remarks that we have heard come out from Maharashtra, particularly made by Mr. Sanjay Raut. And Supreme Court heard these arguments, and clearly given the fact that the court is keeping this matter pending with itself is indication enough that whatever happens on the ground will be under the Supreme Court's radar going forward.
All right, Meenakshi Bhanja there reporting for us, getting us all the details from the Supreme Court on all the developments taking place in Maharashtra. Meenakshi, thank you so much for joining us.